Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at the 20th Annual Dallas International Film Festival. It is a delight to be seated with Greg Kwedar, filmmaker responsible for the films Transpecos, which screened at DIFF, I think, 2016, Jockey, Sing Sing, and of course, Train Dreams, among many others. And it's a real pleasure to sit with you, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out today. It's great to be with you all.
So I want to start at the beginning. I've read about you were in accounting school at Texas A&M, and you kind of sort of jumped ship from that vessel into filmmaking. How did that happen?
So yes, I was an accounting major at Texas A&M, and among other things, like I did it because, I'd always had kind of an entrepreneurial mind, and I had my own businesses growing up. I had a DJ business in high school, 2 Loud DJs, and a window cleaning business, and so going into a business field was like a natural extension of that. Also wanted to be an athlete, and I was interested in all sorts of careers and things, and I think a lot of that was just my imagination. I was interested in like the story behind it more than the thing itself. And I was also an athlete, and as a result, I was a rugby player of all things. And between my junior and senior year of college, I had an opportunity to go play for a team in Sydney, Australia. I'd also gotten an internship offer from PricewaterhouseCoopers like the day before I left on that trip. And I'm in Australia, and it was the first time I was ever really on my own, and I had a lot of time on my hands and when I wasn't training, and I just found myself at a cafe in front of a notebook looking at a blank page and feeling the kind of latent artist start to surface, and thinking back to, I had an AP US English teacher in high school, Mrs. Smith, my junior year of high school, who read an essay of mine and said I had a voice. She said, keep writing. And
Those teachers are so crucial for the development of the artist.
Well, yeah, in anyone in your life, but particularly teachers, can say one thing that can fundamentally alter the course of your life. And also they can say that could be the right thing, and they can say the wrong thing. That could also really kill a dream, and she happened to say the right thing, but it was one I had pushed down and buried for a long time. And in that cafe in Sydney, it surfaced again, and I was hearing her again. And I started writing a little short film idea. I don't know why. I didn't even know the format, and it was longhand. But I also looked up the film school in Sydney kind of on a lark and asked for a tour. And on the tour of the facility, got to the basement, and these 2 women were casting their short film, and they just handed me the sides for the audition. Like, hey, can you read for the actors coming in? And I was like, I'm just on a tour, but
what would you say?
Why not?
Yeah. What would you say to somebody in your shoes who's maybe feeling really nervous about sending that kind of email asking for a tour? Like, how do you just kind of naturally have that gusto to do it, or?
I sent a lot of emails at that time. That one happened to be like, yes, we'll give you a tour, and I didn't know really what I was talking about. I wrote one production company in Sydney and said, I would love to, shadow or do anything. I'll do anything. I'll even hold a grip on set. And they were like, we don't have any availability, but I would love to see you hold a grip on set. Then I looked it up, and I was like, oh, joke's on me. Yeah. But these women casting the short film just handed me the sides. I read for a couple hours just at the end of this tour for actors that were coming in. And at the end, they just said, what are you doing in 2 weeks? We need a PA. And I was like, I don't know what a PA is, but I'll be there. And I showed up on this set, and it was at a hotel opposite the Sydney Opera House. They were shooting on film. They had a crane. And wow. I remember just walking onto the set and feeling its magic of all of these different mediums, from visual arts to design to performance, all working together to tell one story. And I just knew it was me, And I came back to my senior year of accounting, and every second of accounting was like someone taking a little knife and just stabbing me in the stomach. And I got to my first exam of the semester, and halfway through the test, I walked out of accounting to pursue film.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that speaks a lot to those moments in your life where you feel like you have to make a decision, you know, which is what filmmaking is. So much of filmmaking is making decisions. And then you moved to Austin while you had the opportunity to go to NYU. And what made you want to go to Austin over a sort of formal, prestigious institution?
Yeah, so as soon as I dropped out of accounting, I did stay an extra year at A&M and got a marketing degree, but I was kind of just phoning it in and was building my portfolio for graduate school applications. I applied to 8 grad schools.
So you were like shooting things or making
just
little
making
films?
videos with my friends that no one should ever see, and I was also, around that time, I was doing a lot of work down on the U.S.-Mexico border with some of my other friends from college in a very particular place in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. And those videos, I was making videos about those experiences, and those videos also terrible, but there was something about the way image and sound and a moment coalesced into something that was like, that's what this feels like. That's what this experience feels like.
And that was documentary work,
More
right?
documentary work. And so I got rejected from 7 of those 8 grad schools, got put on the wait list to the 8th, and I was graduating, no plan. And so some of my friends that I was doing that work on the border with, we had this idea at the time, which was to buy a 1973 Cortez bus that was a former traveling puppet show. And we were going to drive it the length of Mexico. And
it's all about the important decisions you make in life.
And try to work in communities along the way and have hopefully a more holistic understanding of the people that we were working with on the border via that journey. And the bus broke down halfway through Mexico. We all couldn't stand each other at that point too. Split off with another friend. I ended up continuing on and ended up in Guatemala City. And in Guatemala City came across a really powerful story and organization community that was it was called Safe Passage, and they worked in the Guatemala City garbage dump, particularly with women who were mostly single mothers who would go into the dump and recycle trash sort of as entrepreneurs, and were trying to get their education at the same time. And I was like, I want to be here. I think there's a story here. I'm going to move here. And that night I had a voicemail from NYU that I got into film school. And I was like, maybe not. Maybe I'm supposed to go to film school. And so I came back to Texas and, got the books, was 2 weeks from, all my curriculum, all the things I was supposed to read before I arrived on campus. It was actually a unique program called Tisch Asia. It was short-lived. It was in Singapore, actually. And there were 44 students from 40 countries that were going.
Oh, wow.
Oliver Stone was the artistic director.
Wow.
And it was a really thrilling, opportunity. But I panicked 2 weeks before going about the debt I was about to take on. And so I called NYU and said, I'm sorry, it's too expensive, I can't go. And then they offered me a scholarship. I was like, well, it's not the money. It's something else that feels like it's pulling me away from this. And so I ended up getting on a phone call with the head of all of NYU Films. His name is John Titori. And I just said, I just have one question. Am I fucking my life up by not going to NYU because so many of my heroes went to school here?
Right. There's a serious legacy.
Yeah. And there was this long pause, and he just goes, honestly, you could be pushing a hot dog cart in Santa Monica and get just as close to being the filmmaker you're meant to be as if you came to our school. Yeah.
Wow.
And
good on him for being honest with you.
One
moment.
little aside, and I was like, well, I think I'll choose the other path. And the funny thing is that other path, in its strange, meandering way, and the lessons that were learned through, ultimately the movies that Clint and I made together, and then how we made the movies, which we might talk about in a little bit. We created a unique financial model on Jockey and Sing Sing that was a parity structure. that then 10 years later or so, I got a message from NYU saying, will you come teach us how you do your model? And it was John Tintori who had given
Wow.
me that advice. Had no memory of who I was. Once again, those people along the way who say the right thing that help, forge a path. He didn't. It was a little ripple he sent out that he had no memory of, but completely changed my life.
Absolutely. It's a reminder of, the impact of our tiny actions every day. Absolutely. And so how do you meet Clint? And then how do you guys develop an artistic relationship with each other? How does that happen?
Yeah, so I moved to Austin and quickly knew that one of the things about film school and what it offers is it's like enforced community. And
Because your forces on the same projects, going through the grind.
you all have to crew up. You have to figure this shit out. And those then become lifelong friendships. And so in the absence of that, you have to work harder to create that community. And so when I got to Austin, it just so happened there was another friend who went to A&M too, who was an engineering major, wanted to do film. I was a former accounting major, wanted to do film. He knew how to shoot and edit. I knew how to kind of come up with ideas and put together teams and stuff. And we started banding together, and then that circle just kind of kept expanding. And I had a friend at A&M named Rachel Toppert, who she was someone who was able to also just bring really interesting people together. She would always have these dinner parties, and, from people from all walks of life and across campus that I got invited to, and it started this friendship. She's from this tiny little town in East Texas called Goldthwaite, and she had gone off to be a consultant at Bain in New York and had come home over the holidays to see her parents. And Clint is from Florida. He's the son of a jockey in a multi-generation cattle ranching family and had been kind of a vagabond. Had rode his bicycle up the East Coast. He wanted to be the next Bob Dylan and was playing in New York and lived in a stairwell, and then was in Montreal, and he worked on sod farms. And he also had a very unique interest in the border as well, and had made a student documentary where he had traveled the entire length of it, and also was a literature major and wrote fiction. And his Florida ranching family sold their ranch and bought a ranch in a tiny little place called Goldthwaite, Texas. And he had come home at the same time at the holidays and was at the same holiday party as Rachel. And she just said, he was like, I think I'm thinking about maybe playing around, figuring out film. It's always been a dream of mine. She's like, well, you need to meet my friend Greg, who's trying to figure that out too. And he came to Austin, and we ended up hanging out, immediately started talking about our own border experiences. And I had a movie idea about, examining the border conflict through the lens of Border Patrol agents, and it was very nascent, but I was like, I don't know how to write a script. Like, do you want to figure it out with me? And he said yes, and that ended up being a 6-year process to figure out how to write a script and then make a movie. We became best friends in the process, kind of uncovered our way of working through that, which we can talk more about. And then he married Rachel Toppert, became Rachel Bentley. And now our families are inseparable. Yeah,
That's an amazing. I love y'all's story. I'm really hearing many things. One is it takes multiple kinds of brains to make films. It just does. Secondly, I'm curious, how can filmmakers support other filmmakers?
Well,
there's a lot of ego involved in the nature of creation.
I think that's part of what allowed us to thrive in the way that we have, is that we weren't a typical filmmaking dynamic. Clint and I, very early on, I had a film that I wanted to make, Transpecos, and he was my friend, and he was like, I want to help you do that. And we've learned how to write together. We each had very unique, distinguishing strengths as storytellers at that time. I was more architectural and had a good story sense and engine, and he could imbue those stories with immense depth of feeling and character and thematic relevance. And And then yet we had a shared sense of adventure. You know, the discovery process was big for us. We both had documentary backgrounds and really tried to bring a sense of adventure to the work itself, and would travel out into the middle of the desert, you know, while we were writing Transpecos, and find Border Patrol agents bored, leaning against their truck in the middle of the desert. And we'd pretend we were lost Canadian tourists with an upside-down map. Yeah.
Yeah, I read that you guys, to say it again, they pretended like they were Canadian tourists, and they would walk around with a map turned upside down to lure in an engagement with the border agent. So what is interesting about y'all's body of work is y'all's physical and temporal commitment to the subject matter.
Yeah.
And so, how did that idea even come up?
Well,
and then what did you learn from that,
well,
that experience?
I think it was first out of an act of necessity, because what we were interested in about Border Patrol, we couldn't read in books or on the news, and required a field level research. And Border Patrol itself was a very insular and secretive agency, and so we tried to do it the official way, and they said no.
They're not going to respond to your emails.
No. And even when we made the film, the official stance of Border Patrol, we had a do not associate on our project, so it was like people couldn't come up to us, but they also couldn't mess with us, you know, and we weren't supposed to go up to them when we were filming. Regardless, like, agents still came to us all the time, and were like, brought their headshots and stuff like that, and wanted to be in the film, and you know, but the entry point of just like coming to someone without, I think a big part of like our way of working is that we're sincerely interested in that world and the people that inhabit it and what their relationship is with their place, and come in with that openness without predetermining what we think it is and what it should be about. And so I think people can feel that when we engage with them, is a sincerity around our curiosity about what they do and why they do it. And what we always say is, like, we build stories from the dirt up, and we listen first, you know. And out of that, and out of like true human interaction, rather than saying, I know what the film Transpecos is and what the story is, I'm going to place it onto the world and the characters. It's like, how does the story emanate from that world and those characters? And you discover the story via that process. And so people feel that, you know, and feel that you want to know about what they do and why they do it, and that they don't feel your judgment, and then it's a period of trust building, like any relationship, where yes, it started with a little bit of a white lie, not a white lie, it was just a lie, and we would quickly dispel that and sort of say, hey, we're trying to make a film. We want it to be cool, and you know, and we knew like there were certain border films. There's one called The Border with Jack Nicholson, where it's like, this line right here you don't cross. This line, they hate that movie, and we were just like, we're not making The Border. And like, okay, thank God. And then you know, the next phase would be like, okay, like if you want to know what it's about, like come to this bar, and have some of my Border Patrol buddies, like, you know, we can all hang out and have a few drinks. And then drank too much, and we were just having beers, and they were having like Jack and Cokes, and still drinking us under the table. And then out of that came, you know, well, why don't you come have dinner at my place, and you can meet my family, and just over time,
connection,
you know,
absolutely,
connection, absolutely.
And I think it's very apparent in your films that, you know, you could have the same composition of someone and feel the difference between looking at a person and looking at a subject.
Right.
And I think in your body of work, we're looking at people. Absolutely.
Well, there's you know, right when we started out, we wrote a mission statement down. I think it might have been my business school background. Like, okay, we're gonna have a business plan for our careers as filmmakers, and most of it was nonsense. But the mission statement was an instinct then that I think over time has become more vital and sort of a committed practice, which was to tell stories of human connection in impossible places. And what I like about it is if nothing else, it's a filter for us that, as we're looking at, do we engage on a work, is human connection possible? And is there any light here? And I think you could also translate it to be, we're interested in stories of hard-won optimism that don't, shy away from the hardness of the world and the pain of it. And I think if you didn't have that, then whatever optimism you would find would maybe seem naive. But through traveling through that people still can find each other. We can reach across whatever those gaps are and chasms that separate us. And it feels more and more relevant the longer I'm on this planet.
Absolutely. And I would love to focus on our attention about failures or setbacks or these moments in.
I haven't had any of those. Yeah.
I know you have had one on a
Just
film.
hits, just one after the other. Yeah.
If the internet holds true, I read that you were in deep pre-pro on a film and it kind of fell apart a couple weeks before production. Yeah. And could you tell me about twofold? What were you feeling in that moment? And in this moment now, how do you reflect on it and what did it teach you?
Well, that's intimately tied to my Sing Sing story, which is, Transpecos premiered in 2016, and a few months before that, I discovered the idea for Sing Sing. Knew I wanted it to be my next film, and Sing Sing had, a moment. It won the audience award at South by Southwest. We got representation, all the things that are supposed to happen, at that early part of your career. Went out to LA, did what they call as the water bottle tour. If none of you know what that is,
What is that? I don't know what that means.
The water bottle tour is you go meet about 5 production companies and studios a day over like a 3 to 5 day period, and you have a rental car. And every one of these meetings, they offer you a bottle of water. And the whole back seat is just sort of filled with them by the end. It's not very environmentally conscious, and you're just peeing all the time. And that's the water bottle tour. And in it, it's just like this speed dating, and they want to know what you have next, and they're desperate. They're like, we want to make your next thing, and then you're like, all right, well, here it is. And they're like, maybe the next one after that, and then they may pitch you something, and we did 50 or so of those in a few month period, and maybe out of 50, there's 3 people that you really connect with, and that you start talking about something, whether that's an idea you have or something they pitch you. And every step of the way, Sing Sing would just sort of disappoint people whenever we would mention it, because Transpecos it wasn't a thriller per se, but it had elements of that. And so I think the industry they extracted what they thought was commercially viable out of that, and they just wanted more of the same, and so they wanted, you did the border, well, how about this cop thing, or military, or a bomb squad, or, and kind of on and on and on. And you sort of start to accept that if you want to make another film, you need to do it on their terms. And you start internalizing this question of like, oh, what should I do next? What's the right? You start getting more careerist and like, what's the right move? What's this? And you need money, and they seem to have some of it, and that you want to have for yourself. And so then you start getting scripts that come in, and our dear friend Linda Halber is here, and Linda and John, we've made a lot of movies together, and including Transpecos. But Linda read most of these scripts, so. She would be my like first circle of trust read on of it, and you'd read them and you'd just kind of like squint your eyes and you're like, maybe there's if I do it with one eye closed, it might be something that you could sleep at night and work on. But there was stuff that within the lane of the business that we did like a lot. And it's like, well, if we're going to have to work inside of this pigeonhole, like we can still do something cool. And we got some development and things that we were writing and wrote some really cool projects that I was excited to make, you know. In the middle of all that, we were still trying to push Sing Sing 4s, writing drafts, researching, volunteer teaching. Like we were doing all of that in tandem with the drive to make a film. And also Clint, in the midst of all this, was trying to make his first film, which was Jockey. And so anyways, all these years in, one of those thriller films got cast, it got financing. I was a week before actually shipping out for hard prep. We had been in soft prep. I was going to move to the Dominican Republic and shoot the film. I think I had just
so your life was like fully oriented towards the film.
Yeah, I had bought my hiking shoes, which I think was a bad omen maybe, the week before. And then all the financing imploded. And like our actor, she was in flight school with the Air Force, had dyed her hair, was in a jumpsuit, and I had to like tell her, you know, the movie wasn't happening anymore. And it was I felt in the aftermath of that just very creatively empty. It was sort of still inside of the COVID era. And Clint, you know, I was hitting like an ultimate low, and Clint was sort of starting to like really, you know, Jockey was coming out around all of this.
Like 2019?
This was 2021.
Okay.
Jockey was coming out around all of this. You know, we had the Train Dreams script we were starting on, and we were working on that, and yet I had nothing in the tank anymore, and I was starting to grow cynical, because the reality is like I was talking about this beforehand with someone, and it was just like the creating art has never broken my heart, but the business has many times, and that really is the killer. You know, if you get cynical about this, like it's just a matter of time before it's over. You know,
and the envy will really eat you up if you're spending too much energy being envious of other people.
And you know, especially if you're in an industry town, like I had a friend put it like the experience of being in LA is a lot of people starving at the table of a feast, you know. And so you see it, and you see it all happening in front of you, but you don't feel like you can have it or touch it, and that you feel powerless to change the course of that. And so, anyways, I had a day in the aftermath of that movie falling apart where I was taking a break from writing Train Dreams, and I brought up my notebook again. I was like, I'm gonna work on something. It could be an older film idea that I'm gonna pick back up. It could be maybe something new comes from it. But I realized I needed to ask a new question. I've been asking, what should I do, for many years, and then the new question was, if I could only make one more film, what would it be? And it was so obvious it was Sing Sing. And we had done several page one rewrites of that script. And I had thought about giving up on that movie so many times. And in that moment, it was like kind of a wall lifted. And I saw the story, which became about these two friends, Divine I and Divine G, who we actually knew, but we had never centered the movie on them until that point. And I saw the whole film. It was just like abundantly clear. I wrote it in about 10 minutes in a treatment in my notebook. And at the very bottom of the page, I was manifesting some shit. At the very bottom of the page, I was like, Coleman Domingo as Divine G. I'd never met him before, didn't, have any connection to him. He starred in the film. And I saw when we were shooting it, I was a couple months off. I was like, May next year. Saw where it was going to premiere at a festival. Well, that didn't happen either. But enough happened to give me this feeling of inevitability that I needed to go all in.
I love it. It's such a powerful film, and you're describing that 10 minutes, but it's not just 10 minutes. You had really devoted some serious commitment to the idea.
Yeah, from the idea to the end of the promotional run of that film was 9 years. Yeah. 8 years between directing films. And at that time, like,
You're physically spending time in these spaces,
yeah.
absorbing these things, absorbing the experiences, and then spending the time to create a relationship with those experiences, and then sitting and writing it. The Flash,
Yeah.
It's an incredible film, but something equally incredible as well, because I know there's a lot of filmmakers and industry folks in the audience, is this sort of financial structure of the film and the way people were paid. Could you talk a bit about how did that idea come to mind? 2, how did you develop and execute it?
It first began on Jockey, and it was in this desert.
And can you define it off the top?
Yeah. Well, the bit of context before the definition is that we had made Transpecos. It was, again, a success in many books, won awards, reviewed well, played big festivals, had a theatrical release, did a decent amount of revenue. We made that movie for about $650,000, but we had not made our investors whole back from that. I was like, what is it gonna take? Like, we did everything, by the book, but it still was an uphill battle. And so then we were like, okay, well then that just means you have to make movies in the industry. We probably shouldn't be doing this independent. But no one wanted to make our independent visions, And Jockey, once again, like, everyone, eyes would glass over when we would pitch that movie around town, and that we wanted an actor we'd worked with on Transpecos, Clifton Collins Jr., to star in that film. They were like, oh, he has no value. So, like, all the things that we saw as the special thing about it, they saw as the roadblock. And eventually you get to a point where it's like, well, fuck it, we got to make it ourselves again. And at that point, it was like, if we're going to do this independently, we have to find a way to lower the risk and make the movie for less money than our first. Usually it's like, oh, well, the next one we'll make for more. We were like, we have to make it for less, but we don't want to make it cheaper. We want to still have the same quality. And so how do you make the same quality, if not better quality, for a lower cost? It needs a new paradigm. Like, the traditional structure wouldn't work. And, like, coming from accounting and stuff, like, as I came into the business, I saw the lack of transparency in our business, the amount of waste often on screen, and in that lack of transparency, there is an inherent lack of trust that comes from that. We're all sort of put in these silos. The producers have the information of what the budget is, and then that producer goes one-to-one and negotiates the deals with everybody on the movie. And we'll inevitably get to a place where they go, will you do it for less than your rate? And the person probably would, but they don't want to be taken advantage of. And inevitably, in all of this one-to-one negotiations, these budgets like just inflate and inflate and inflate because no one trusts each other. So all that to say, we came up with this model really by just asking questions of our collaborators of, like, how could we do this better, more transparent, and kinder. And this model was born out of that, which is that we, on Jockey and then Sing Sing, we all worked for the same rate. So for the star of the film, Clifton on Jockey, Coleman Domingo on Sing Sing, worked for the same rate as us, as the production assistants, as the editors, composers, sound designers, gaffers, grip. And what it's saying is that, so the only variable of someone earning more or less is time, and what it's saying is that we all hold the same intrinsic value on the project. And, which is true. Yeah. There's also another, like, kind of pervasive term in our business, which is like the line, above the line, below the line. Above the line being the artist that should have equitable value in a project, and below the line are employees, and
labor, yeah.
And labor, right. And it was like, what would happen if you erase the line between above and below the line and we were all just making a film together? What happens if you migrate someone from an employee mindset to a partner mindset? How can that not just make the budget more approachable, but how can it change the whole culture on a set because you're flattening the hierarchy of what comes with a hierarchical pay is also like this idea is worth more than this idea. But if you flatten that, what happens is, and we've seen it, firsthand, is that it's a culture where the best ideas can come forward and win, and those often come from everywhere. Anyone who makes films knows that a great idea can come from anywhere, and we're actually just betting on that. And so it's not in abstract. I mean, in the literal sense, like you can, through this model, we were able to make Jockey with a 10-person crew for $350,000, which normally would have cost, $1 million, $1.5 million. And all of those artists that worked on that film own the movie with us. And so it's not just the rate, but also according to time, we would allocate equity on the film. And so every creative that worked on both Jockey and Sing Sing own the creative half of those movies. And we were able to, from Sing Sing, that was 92 artists that owned half of Sing Sing. We made that film for $1.5 million, which traditionally would have cost $3 to $5 million. And it was acquired by A24 for a profit. And we've issued thus far over $1 million in profit to those artists.
Wow, that's incredible. It's incredible.
Also, what starts to happen when you do that, when most of our craftspeople work in a gig economy, job to job, no equity in anything, and once that income, that mailbox money starts to flow, it's amazing to watch like how it sort of shifts trajectories, because it's money that wasn't planned for when you're just surviving, and we saw really interesting things happen from like debts being paid off, someone having the cash to move from New York to LA to chase an opportunity, a wedding was paid for, someone was able to just stay in the business, particularly like production assistants is not a sustainable wage for most. And that is,
but they're so important.
And that's our next generation of talent. That's where we're proving out talent. And so if you can make that sustainable, who knows what great artists we lost because of the realities of the economics of this business.
Absolutely. And I think all of that is such a testament to, you had this sort of accounting sensibility as a young person, and it's still obviously part of the bigger picture in the way you think about film.
Yeah, and just something about the alchemy of Clint and I think I was getting at this in an earlier question, but we went off to another tangent. But there was something about the fact that normally as a director, you work on an island and you sit, in a position of authority, through your whole career. And the fact that the two of us had to find a way to work together where we were both writers, but we would direct independently and be in service of the other's project when you were doing that taught this humility where we had to nurture a community unto ourselves. And so I think that that spirit became like translated into like how we thought about systems, how we thought about like how you could make the broader community healthier. And it's something that we never thought that like our financial model would be like one of the main like marketing pillars of the Sing Sing release, but it just started to reverberate, and it felt in line with what that film was, which was a story of a community, and that we could back that it was done in the way that it was, particularly incarcerated actors who have been taken advantage of by systems, had literal ownership over their very own story was a big deal. But it's something that we're, continuing to double down on. We actually just started a company called Ethos that, we'll announce something very soon. But, the next phase of this is we want to start backing other filmmakers using that model and financing their films. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I have, oh man, I want to give time to the audience. I have one more question, which is, we didn't even get to touch on Train Dreams, of course, but here we are. So lucky to have you after being nominated for several Academy Awards early this year. what can you give us a snapshot into your feeling? A lot of what we've talked about has been the sort of the grind of finding your way through the industry as someone who wants to make films. And can you just give us a snapshot of your thinking as you are coming off of this really incredible level of recognition for your last film?
Yeah, wow. I mean, we're really still tired. I think it's not. It's an enviable position that we're aware of, and it's life changing, and we're very grateful for it. But what is required of you on these campaigns, isn't talked about probably enough. And it's like, and we did 2 back-to-back campaigns, Sing Sing and then Train Dreams. I mean, when I was and Clint bore the brunt of Train Dreams, and I bore the brunt of Sing Sing, but we both paid.
Like you're talking like 3 years to.
I traveled every week for a year on Sing Sing promoting the film. Which the beautiful thing is you have these in any room that you come in. It's again another opportunity for connection, and so there's really special things that happen and opened up, and you're on this sort of weird awards circus, and you're traveling with a lot of the same films and filmmakers you look up to, and what I wasn't prepared for the first time around was how much you felt like a stock price, like you're just in and out and up and down, and did you get this regional critics award or not, or did you get this
I
nomination?
could probably place a bet on it online somewhere.
Oh yeah, you could bet on it. Spend a little too much time on some Reddit subthreads that kind of really was not the healthiest behavior, and out of that you can sort of lose sight of your own worth and your own meaning in the work, and it becomes like it becomes very results driven, and I think in the middle of all that, there was a New York Times journalist that ended up befriending me who like hops around on these circuits, and he was like, look around the room. This is your cohort. This is your graduating class that you're traveling with. This like this is the opportunity is the relationship, is the community that comes from it, and I think the time that really set in was like, yes, the award ceremonies and stuff. They can be pretty cool. I grew up watching the Oscars, and then like you're there, and it's insane. But the feeling of being in what they do a class photo every year, and this year when they did it, they call up each nominee one by one. There's 250 of us, I think, something like that, and the whole room, celebrates that person coming up, and you take your place, on this stage for this photograph, and you feel your place in history, and that's when like I was like, okay, wow, like what an honor all of this is.
Well deserved, so well deserved. I would love to open the floor for any questions.